How to get the most out of your farm by communicating with your neighbors. I guarantee it is different than what you're thinking. My name is Jake Hofer. I'm a real estate broker out of the state of Illinois, co-owner of Exodus, and this is a snippet from a conversation with Thomas Mlsna from Wisconsin on the Land Podcast. Here you'll find new uploads every single Thursday and Saturday, podcast episodes every single Monday at 5 a.m. Let's dive into how to communicate with your neighbors to get more big bucks for everyone. Here we go. The next question, I know you mentioned you're in Amish country, so would that be a deal breaker for you? Obviously, good neighbors are great, but what's your philosophy on neighbors?
Yeah, so this is a conversation I have frequently, right? So with my business and the coaching side of it, I like to say habits, then habitat, because habits are short-term. That's a relatively short-term change. Habitat is longer-term development, and directly related to that is your neighbors. And what I tell my clients all the time is communication creates common goals, where I would prefer, honestly, at this point in the game, I would prefer to buy a property that's surrounded by neighbors that are there all the time and invested in the land, like Amish, they're not going anywhere, versus buying a property where the neighbors are out of state, or it's their second, third, fourth property. They're not there. They're not as invested. They just show up, they do whatever, and they move on. There's many reasons for that. One is, if you need to communicate on a short-term basis with those neighbors, maybe you shoot a deer that crosses the fence. Maybe you get a tractor stuck in there. You have to access from a different location. I was just on a property not that long ago. The same day I was there, there was a guy there with an excavator, and he flipped it on the road going out. We were basically locked in this property. Well, we got permission from the neighbors to bring a big lift in, basically a small crane, through the back end of the property, but they had to cross the field, right? If that neighbor was out of state and you couldn't get a hold of him, we would have been screwed, for lack of a better term, right? So that's a big thing. But communicating with those neighbors and letting them know your intentions, letting them know what you're doing, in the long run, it's always beneficial. And if that neighbor is not as invested in the area and invested in those goals, it's going to come back and hurt you. And the other thing too is, when you buy a property, going back to what we were talking about with the building sites, if that neighbor's been there for 10 years and whether it's Amish or not, maybe it's a farmer and that farmer has kids, and when he passes on, those kids are going to inherit the property, and they've got a lot more pride and just blood, sweat, and tears invested in that property. Then that once you get a good thing going, it's probably going to stay good for a lot longer, or continually get better. Again, communication's the key there. Inversely, if you have a guy that just bought that because it's an investment property and he doesn't want to put as much time into it, and I'm not saying out-of-state guys don't put time into their property and invest in it, but you have a guy that just buys it to buy it. He might flip that property next year, or he might sell it to a development company, and everything changes. And now you just spent half of a decade trying to improve your property, and there's nothing you can do about what's happening next door. So there's a lot of it that goes there. But my best advice is, look for properties with neighbors that have roots in the area if you can, and work with them right away. And don't be afraid to talk to them. My general rule of thumb there is I always give my neighbors a little bit more information than they give me when it comes to the actual hunting side of things. So, I'm at the point, even with the Amish neighbors, I'm at the point where every year I print out a packet full of trail camera photos and give them to them. I'm not trying to tell them they need to set goals in line with mine, but I let them know what mine are. And I show them, there's X number of quality mature deer on the property. Here's a bunch of deer that with 1 or 2 more years have phenomenal potential. And, obviously I don't need to print a packet full of yearling bucks because they're going to recognize that. But by doing that, they go, and obviously, there's probably some out there, but most Amish aren't running trail cameras, right? So they don't know until they see a deer. But by doing that, they're aware that there's good deer in the area. And that's probably one of the biggest things I've dealt with in our area with Amish is the non-Amish neighbors have this mentality where, well, if I don't shoot that deer, the Amish are going to shoot it, right? If I don't shoot that, someone else is going to shoot it anyway. So I might as well just shoot that 2-year-old buck. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not always true. The Amish might do it because they need to feed their family, or they might do it because they don't know what else is out there. But now I'm at the point where last year I handed out 6 different packets to neighbors with those. And again, I'm not telling them to set goals. I'm just saying, this is what it is. And this is, these are bucks I'm after, I followed. And then they go, okay, well, we know there's better bucks out there. So we'll kill some does and feed our family, and we're going to hold off. 2 years ago, in the neighboring area, I think there was 4 different Amish kids that killed bucks over 160 inches with a bow.
Wow.
Which is pretty dang impressive, if you ask me.
Yeah.
They've come a long way.
Has the photo packet helped, you think,
dramatically
with your goals?
Yep. And again, it's, I really only talk to these neighbors a few times a year. And, this day and age, it's hard to believe what people are saying, but, picture's worth 1,000 words. And if I show them a trail camera picture of a buck and, one, it's no different than us looking at trail cam pictures, right? Like, I want to know what the inventory is. I also want to know that's the deer, so that when I see that deer in the woods, I'm not trying to, judge that deer and make a decision. I just want to go, okay, it's game time, or I'm just going to enjoy this encounter. So it's definitely helped with them. It's slowed them down. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's my biggest goal with even the people that hunt our property and the neighbors, is I just want them to slow down, take a second, and, don't feel rushed to pull that trigger because you don't know what's happening or what's out there. If they slow down and judge that animal a little bit because they know there's a better buck out there, or they're trying to, confirm that sighting with that deer, then they're just more apt to stay off the trigger, have a little bit more control. Mm-hmm. So, and at the same time, it just promotes, again, that sense of community where you're all kind of on the same page. And at the end of the season, sometimes it's hard to figure out where some of these deer are moving when they're not on your property, right? That's kind of, back to that spotlight thing, but with deer movement, we only know what we know. Right. So you only know what that deer is doing when he's on your property 40, or in front of your cameras. Yeah. You don't know. Yeah, exactly. You don't know where he is when he's off your property. But once you start communicating with neighbors and, you show them the trail cam pictures, and then at the end of the year, I'll check in with them and see what they killed or what they saw. And then, they tell me, yeah, I had an encounter with that buck or this and that, blah, blah, blah. Well, sometimes it can be as simple, especially with a small property, it's just as simple as knowing, like, okay, when that buck moves off this property, he's going out this corner, he's going that direction versus that direction. Because if I'm trying to kill that deer on an escape route or an entrance route of the property, which oftentimes, if you're in hill country, especially, a lot of your best pinch points are, and I don't want to condone or promote fence sitting by any means, but a lot of your best pinch points are where these fence lines come in, because they long ago, they cleared off a spot for that fence line on this hillside and created a flat spot or a little bit of a plateau or a bench up there. And, so you're trying to figure out these corners where these deer are pinching through. And a lot of times that information can come from just communicating with your neighbors. Yeah. So at the end of the day, again, give a little bit more than what you get. And, the guys that are running cameras, I'll give them pictures and hope that they give them back. And if they don't give them back, then I don't give them anymore. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if I'm chasing a 200-inch deer.
Well, yeah, you're not sharing that packet.
Well, no, I will, but
oh, really?
Honest, I mean, I'm going to give them the shittiest picture of that deer I have, where it's like a blurry picture in the background, but they know it's a giant deer, right? Because I want to generate that excitement. It's no different than the industry as a whole, right? We want to keep everyone excited because we want to keep hunting around. And at the same time, I don't want my neighbor to go out and just be like, well, I'm just going to shoot that deer because nothing else is out there. If that guy goes through the season in the back of his mind, knowing that at any given time he might cross paths with a buck of a lifetime, he's for sure going to hold off on killing that stud 3-year-old with a ton of potential. Yeah. And if he doesn't, then so be it. You do everything you can, and at the end of the day, it's their decision and their goals. Yeah. But yeah, I always share them. A funny story on that. I mean, the year I was chasing that really big deer, I shared a picture with a neighbor, and he shared one back. And at first, I was like, oh man, that deer's moving through an area I did not expect. And then a couple of weeks later, I was, just like obsessing with this thought. And it actually turned out that there was 200-inch deer in the area that year. That the other buck didn't get killed that year. He actually got killed like 2 or 3 years later and had regressed quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And I think the guy that actually shot him at the time, he shot him during the rut, and he had like half of his main beam was broken off, but he had like 6 or 7-inch bases. And he was just a freak of a deer too. So it's always better to be, honesty is the best policy in any situation. Yep. So if you can be honest and open with them, and you don't always have to tell them everything, but don't lie. If someone backs you into a corner and asks about stuff, you just tell them what they need to know. And again, give them a little bit more than they give you and hope that they reciprocate and move on from there. And it all works out because, there's plenty of studies now proving you can't really manage a deer herd on a small property.
Sure. Yeah.
You can't manage genetics. It's hard to manage the whole thing. The best thing you can do is keep pressure off and hope that you can provide a sanctuary for young bucks to grow to an older age. But when you get all those neighbors on board and create that sense of community and those common goals, and these guys start passing up bucks, it just increases everyone's chances
and morale,
opportunity and morale for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.